Hey besties, and welcome back to another episode on the Your Two Best Friends podcast with your co-hosts Annalise, LaCasse, and myself, Danielle, Hanlon. We are actually joined by two very special guests, our husbands. And for the first time, you guys are going to get to hear them on the podcast. My husband, Connor Hanlon, and Annalise's husband, Alec, LaCasse, are joining us for a very special episode all about marriage. So this is going to be marriage part 2 with our husbands taking over. Mm-hmm. So welcome, and we're excited for you guys to get to know them.
Yeah. Buckle up, guys. Here we go. Let's do it. I am Alec. I have a husband. I am a husband? I am a husband, I said. I said I am a husband.
I have a husband.
No, I said I am a husband.
You did not say that.
I have a husband. His name is Connor.
Alec.
I have a wife. I am a husband. And I am a human being. And today I'm going to bring you some wisdom that I have accrued from many years, almost 2 years of experience as a married person. So I think you should listen to me. I think you should.
What do you do for a living?
Many things, various things, including wood carving, teaching of wood carving, instruction of wood carving, wood carving itself. Did I say teaching wood carving?
Yes.
Yeah.
Connor?
All right, my name is Connor. I am an electrical technician. I'm currently going back to school for electrical engineering. I have a bachelor's degree in pastoral studies, so that's where I actually was friends with Annalise first before Danielle even met her for 2 years, and before Alec met her. Mm-hmm. So we were friends first. Just want to put that out there.
The OGs.
So we are the OGs.
Well, funny story, because Danielle and I, we've been friends for
our lifetime, right?
Longer.
Yeah.
We were born in the same hospital.
Back to the topic at hand. We're going to talk about marriage. And I would love if you guys could share with us a bit about maybe some misconceptions you had about marriage before you entered into it. And then kind of with that, maybe what you learned instead. Something new, a new idea that you learned within marriage.
One of the biggest ones that Connor and I talked about, and Connor, you brought this up over coffee today, and probably the one that young Christian men think about most going into marriage, at least one of the most important things to guys, is sex. And thinking about sex as a young man, it's really like the center of your reason for getting married in some ways, or like one of the primary reasons you get married. And when you think about marriage, you're like talking with your buddies about it, and you're going, man, it's going to, I'm so excited to have sex every single day with my wife. It's gonna be so much fun, and my wife is just gonna love it as much as I do, and want it more than I do. But the thing that's most interesting about it is not the reality of sex not measuring up to that, but it's more of the fact that the relational element, the marriage itself, becomes overwhelmingly more important than sex. And I think it's more a testament to the beauty of being married and the fulfillment that being married to the right person that can have in your life. Mm-hmm. And sex actually becomes a much smaller part of marriage, at least in my experience. And I would say, what would you say in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, and you guys have addressed it on the podcast some as well, but it's definitely something that at the beginning of it, it is something that is, or like, I guess, before you're in a serious relationship. Yeah, you're talking to your buddies. You're like, yeah, when we get married, then I'll finally be able to have sex. Right. Because it's like, in Christianity, the biblical ethic for sex is, not having sex outside of marriage. And so you think, well, the only time I can have sex is in marriage. So I cannot wait to get married and have sex. But it's like, then, and like you said, it's great. Like, sex is awesome, and it's a great gift from God. Yeah, something that is to be enjoyed within a marriage. Right, but you idolize it so much, and like, oh, you can't wait to get married for that specific reason. But really, I mean, once you get into a serious relationship, some of that wears off. But there is still that idea that, like, oh, it's going to be like literally the best thing in my marriage is getting to have sex or something. But it is far from the best thing. It is the relationship that you're building, the friendship. The unconditional love that you have. And then on top of that, that's where you can have good sex out of a good relationship where you're connecting, I think, like spiritually, emotionally, on all those levels. When you're connecting like that, that's when you actually do have good and fulfilling sex. And it's like, icing on the top. It's like, oh, this is something extra, another way that we connect emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Yep.
And it's just, added on top of a good, healthy relationship and marriage. And it is really good, but it's far from the best part of being married.
That's true.
Yeah. And so on top of that misconception about marriage too, especially coming from, I grew up in a Christian home, going to church all the time, went to a Christian college. I didn't have a ton in the way of like sex education and learning about actually having sex. It's like, oh, well, when we have sex, it's going to be great. And we're both going to love it and enjoy it and know exactly what we're doing. And that's definitely also a misconception of, you don't just like, not just so good at it right away. And it's not, you know what I mean? Like, you learn each other in that way too. You learn how to love each other in that way, just like you learn to love someone in a different way, love your spouse in a different way. You learn and you get better and you grow. So I think there's some misconception that it's like, it's going to be so good right away and we're just going to have this incredible chemistry. And you know what I mean? You can have good chemistry, but it doesn't mean you're going to know how to actually have good sex as well. So there's that education you have to do for yourself. As a couple, I think it's good to do.
True.
So what did you guys, when you were dating, when you were two Christian men wanting to get married, what were you looking for in someone that you wanted to marry?
The first thing that I was looking for was a Christian, so someone who took their faith seriously, someone who did love Jesus and I was going to put him first over me, because I think that's the foundation of what makes a really good and healthy marriage. So that was definitely the first thing that I was looking for. And then I was looking for just someone else who had similar worldview as me. I will say that like Danielle and I definitely had some differences in worldviews. I grew up in Upper Michigan, out in the middle of nowhere. She grew up in New Jersey. So it was like we came from very different, even like cultural backgrounds, even though we're both, white middle class individuals. It's like we still have some very different beliefs, but through that, underlying everything else, had a very similar worldview. We agreed on the things that really mattered the most within Christianity, doctrine-wise and other things like that. And even outside of Christianity, we saw the world in a lot of the same ways. And in the ways that we didn't, we actually, sharpened each other in the ways that we didn't agree. We were able to kind of bring perspective that the other one hadn't thought of before in order to sharpen the way that we thought and believed and the way that we saw the world. So I think I didn't want someone who believed all the same things, but similar worldview and the things that were very important, kind of non-negotiables, especially within Christianity and doctrine, had to be there. And then the rest kind of, we sharpened each other, I think, in those other less important beliefs as well.
It's good.
The two things. I'm sure there's more, but you can feel free to share.
Yeah, and then agreeing with everything obviously you've said, or parrot, definitely I won't parrot that because I think you said it well. But for me, I have sort of known that I wanted to be with someone who was different than me and strong in the areas that I'm weak. Like, for instance, whatever I am, Enneagram 3, Wing 4, Enneagram 4, Wing 3. There's a controversy supposedly about this. They've tried to reassign my Enneagram. But I'm not sure I know enough about Enneagram to even be upset about that. But my understanding of it as a 4 or a 3, whatever you want to call it, is there's a susceptibility to, and I relate to this more as a younger person, enjoying or kind of like reveling in sadness, right? Or, liking really sad music and kind of liking sad or darker art and being really kind of addicted to the emotional. There's probably a victim mindset in that, and somewhere in there as well. Just having that background of being a musical person, an artistic person as a career, creative person as a career, and then just kind of finding myself navel gazing or being kind of overly self-aware, right? Susceptible to being just kind of the center of my own world. Whereas Annalise, meeting her, it was a fun contrast because Annalise lives outside of herself in a lot of ways. She is very present in her relationships, and she's also somebody as a 7, Enneagram 7, if you don't know about that, someone who is fun-loving, who does not like to experience pain. So the exact opposite of me, and healthy in the ways that I'm not, but also unhealthy in the sense of going to the opposite extreme, in the same way that I was unhealthy, going to sadness, she was avoiding. So I think having our relationship has made us more complete in the sense of she kind of brings me to a positive mindset if I'm dealing with guilt or shame from my past, or she has a really great way of helping me through those emotions, and not in a way of belittling the significance of them, but to say it is important to to find redemptive value in your suffering, and that having her, somebody who does that naturally, is important. Like somebody who compliments you in the areas of your weakness, I think is really important in marriage. And I would say, aside from some of the cliches, I do think that your spouse should feel like home. And I think that was one thing I found with Annalise, is when I spent time with her, that she felt like somebody who was very, I was so comfortable, with her. And I felt like so relaxed being around her. I didn't feel on edge. I didn't feel anxious. I felt at peace with myself. And those are some other things that I was looking for. And yeah, definitely faith. I mean, if my wife was not, I couldn't marry someone who didn't have a strong faith, stronger than mine. And I wanted to, whether that's healthy or not, I wanted to be with someone who I felt had a strong faith. And so I feel like I've done that well. So.
Yeah, I feel like going off a couple things you had said as well, that is something like earlier that you were saying about having somebody who has some of the opposite things to you to bring that out of you. I'm an Enneagram 9. Danielle's an Enneagram 8. And so she was able to also like push me and bring a lot out of me where I was avoiding confrontation or avoiding difficult conversations. She was able to say, you really should like stand up for yourself in this way, or let this person know how you feel, or other things like that, where it is really a thing that I don't think I was intentionally looking for it, but I think like I knew that I needed that just help getting out of that mindset and just actually being able to have those conversations, things like that. Still not good at it, and it's definitely one of my weaknesses, but Danielle helps me to do those things a lot. And we even had a conversation like recently where we're like, like we were attracted to each other for like reasons to where we could help each other, but then also like in the same ways that we could like lean on the other person for things that we needed to do ourselves too.
Right.
So it was like catching ourselves and being like, you're really good at this and I'm really bad, but I'm just like, and that's maybe why I was attracted to you, but now I'm like relying on you for all of these things when really I should try to be stepping into those. And so we tried to start reworking things where we we're trying to give each other space to grow in those areas that we have weaknesses in. Right. While each person has their strengths and they continue to work and use those strengths for sure, but at certain times allowing the person to space to get better at their weaknesses and become a better and more complete and whole person, if that makes sense. But I definitely was looking for somebody to who had as strong of faith as me, who could call me out on stuff, bring out the best in me. It really is one of those things where sometimes we've all, I think, been in relationships where we became worse people, or your friends. Totally. You've seen it where it's like I liked you better when you weren't in a relationship with this person or something. And I think that's something that you should obviously look for, but sometimes it's hard to tell. So be asking like your friends and family, hey, am I a better person in general when I'm with this person in person, or when I'm just generally say I'm without this person and I'm hanging out with you? Am I a worse person now? Like, since I've been with this girl or guy or whoever you're with, like something you should be checking outside of yourself too is saying like, do other people see me changing for the better or for the worse because I'm with this person? Yeah. Because sometimes it's hard to tell in yourself. Like sometimes you might be feeling worse or becoming a worse person. You may not even be realizing it. And they could even be a Christian individual, someone who objectively is a good person, but you guys just don't mesh well, or but you both have weaknesses in similar areas and whatnot. So I think it's just, they can have everything on paper, but it doesn't mean necessarily either that you guys will be good fits, and it's good to have those check-ins with people that you trust as well.
Right. And to your point about being the type of person who is willing to change or be susceptible to being changed. I feel like that's a good thing to look for in a partner too, is someone who not only, and it's maybe there's a bit of I don't know what, like a juxtaposition, I don't know what else to say, but that the person simultaneously shouldn't necessarily need or feel the need or want to change you, but should be willing to both do so when necessary, and to be changeable, or to be humble and willing to change, and realize that that there's this great potential for a marriage to make you a better person. And when you're with someone who isn't afraid to make you better, I think that's super helpful too. Like Annalise will speak into areas of weakness in my life, and I try to do so as well. And those are some really valuable moments. They never feel good in the moment, but in fact, that could turn into, and maybe it often does turn into, an argument. And that's okay. It doesn't have to turn into a fight. It can be an argument. But as long as you come out of that realizing that you were wrong in some ways, and I think that being with someone who's humble is huge too, and really important. Because I know I've heard of marital struggles, and it seems like a lot of the root of those struggles seems to be, from my very unprofessional perspective, Annalise could speak to it way more than I could, but a root of like pride or arrogance of saying this person is the type of person who does this, and meanwhile not seeing the actions, that the complicit behavior that you have in the role of a married person. So
yeah, that reminds me of, in our premarital counseling, we kind of have assessed after the fact, like, what did we actually perceive? But and I think maybe we thought that maybe there was a lack. But then going back to what we actually were practically taught, it's really good. And we saw two different people, and in one we learned to seek to understand the other person's point of view, and to really understand in a conversation, what are they getting across, or like what are they feeling in that moment, and how is that affecting then the way that they're acting. And then the other premarital counseling we received, that gentleman really focused on apologizing, what you talked about, like when you are wrong, to admit that you're wrong, and to ask for forgiveness, and then to tell the person that you love them. And so I think that's really interesting that those were the things that were taught to us, and how that really is, when it comes to marriage, a lot of the communication does kind of not some of it, I would say a lot of it revolves around that, seeking to understand the other person's point of view. And then when you do mess up, being able to admit that you messed up, because it is difficult to do that. It is hard to say when you are wrong. I know that I struggle with that, but it is so necessary in marriage to be willing, or easy to apologize and to admit when you are wrong, and for the other person to be easy to forgive, because we're constantly like, this is the person who sees me at my best, but it's also the person who sees me at my worst. And so he has he I guess he doesn't have to be, but he has been easy to forgive when I do come to him in, like, I don't know why I spoke to you that way, or like why I did blah, blah, blah. And so, that's really good.
I think the point that you made, kind of going off of that on a little bit different direction, is like, your spouse seeing you at your best and your worst. I think when you're thinking about being in a relationship, if you're in the dating phase, or before you're dating someone, or, you're engaged and stuff, it's easy to think like, oh, I'm going to be my best for this person. And like, and I'm going to always put my best foot forward, and I'm going to love them so well. And I think adding into the misconceptions of marriage is like, you're your best and you're your worst to your spouse. Like the person that you love the most, like you hurt the most a lot of the time as well. So it's one of those things that you have to be like ready for that, but then also like know that like it's okay on a certain level. You're growing and learning, and you want to love people well, but you are going to hurt them, and also they're going to hurt you, and you do have to be quick to forgive, and you have to be, because you have to know I need forgiveness constantly as well. It goes along with grace, like God has grace on us, so we have grace on other people. And so realizing our own need for grace should allow us the space to have grace on other people. And I mean, there are certain instances where something very hurtful might, need distance or space or something else. But just general relational issues that you come across, you do want to be quick to forgive, or and talk through things and be willing to admit when you're wrong, admit when you said something you shouldn't have said, or did something you shouldn't have did, and then also seek to understand why the other person would.
And so I know on the podcast we give a lot of perspective when it comes to being women and maybe what it would like to be a good wife and these different things. But since we have you guys on, it would be great if you could speak to, what do you think it looks like to be a good husband?
This one makes me kind of nervous.
I want to start out by saying neither Alec or I are the experts on being good husbands.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm feeling.
I think we're pretty good husbands, but but we will try to give some sound advice.
There are probably better husbands.
Oh, for sure. There are definitely better husbands. There are worse. There are worse husbands.
I mean, worse.
There are also better husbands, certainly. So.
Yeah,
it's good. Aim right for the middle, the sweet spot.
Okay, first advice:
how to be a mid husband.
Yeah, just
like Connor and Alec.
Do your best. Let the rest fall into place.
That's all I go by.
How to be a good husband? I do think, and this might be a little bit cliche and lame, but it definitely first starts out with your own relationship with God. You have to build that foundation and be anchored in God, in the Word, in the truth, because the reality is when you do stray away from that, like when I stray away from that, I become a worse person, and I become less loving, I become more self-centered and selfish, and out of that, then I become a worse husband, I become a worse friend, I just become a worse person in general. So trying to stay disciplined and anchoring myself in the Word, in prayer, in things like that. And again, that's so cliche, that's like what every Christian would ideally say, but it is true. The reason they do say it is because it's true, and I think that has to also be out of a heart of wanting to know God more, love God more, wanting to worship God, just out of that heart, and then you will grow closer to God and grow closer to your spouse as well. So I think it has to start with that.
It's good.
There's other. We can get into less cliche things, but
it's not cliche. That's
laying
that's
the ground with that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
My marriage improved tremendously when I became more consistent, a more consistent Bible reader. And prayer. I think is the appropriate term.
In that season, you also became even more active in the church, I feel like.
Yeah.
And our relationship really changed.
It did. Yeah, I think being involved in young people's lives is big for us. And we're both youth leaders at our church. And Annalise has had some experience doing that before, but I hadn't had any experience before that. And as much as it sounds subtracted from marriage, having younger people in your life who you have impact on, or have impact, or who are watching you, really, that made a big difference for me, because it started to make me think of my behavior from the perspective of even a parent, which neither of us couples are with kids. We don't have kids.
Don't ask us how to be good dads.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we don't know. We have a dog together. That's it. I'm an average dog dad.
Get pretty cornered on the parenting advice.
Don't ask me how to raise a dog either.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
I think just concluding that, behaving in such a way, I think that's what the beauty of a relationship with God is. It gives you a sense of responsibility and awareness to God and your behavior. And in the same way that I think, or in a similar way, definitely not the same way, that being a youth leader forces you to not want to be a hypocrite in your behavior. And so, I think that's improved our marriage a lot, being accountable to other people.
Yeah. I think That's really interesting. I've never really thought about this before, but before being married, Alec was really good at seeking out mentorship. Had like so many great mentors in his life who were pouring into him.
Mhm.
And I think I didn't do as well in that area, but was really good at mentoring the next generation of like being a youth leader and meeting up with students. And so coming together has been good because I think everyone needs to be doing both. Like receiving, and then you have these people that you're pouring into, and you were doing that with friends, but like specifically this next generation. And you're totally right, because then there's this accountability above you, but there is such accountability when you're working with those that are younger than you. Exactly what you're saying. When I'm mentoring girls and they're talking to me about how they're struggling to read the Bible, I'm like, yep, like I'm there with you, and it's, you want to be able to like the people that we're discipling, they become like us, and so we want to not have like these, I don't know, we don't want sin in our life, and we don't want these like major flaws in our life, because we don't want that to be replicated in the people that we are discipling. And so I think that's such a good point. And even in marriage, because there's a lot of children who grow up without having stable parents, or the family is divorced, and so to be a healthy couple who then can show this generation like what it looks like to really love each other, and to serve one another is really powerful, and is great accountability within marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought of two more things too while we were talking about two things that helped me to be a good husband. One was being more intentional, I think, with my time, with taking care of tasks and stuff like that. Like I'm a task oriented person, so doing like tasks around the house was like really easy for me. But some other things that were like on the fringes, like making this call, getting this bill paid off, doing these little things, like sometimes I can let those things slide. So being more intentional about those things has been helpful, because it's like I'm not only accountable to me anymore, I'm accountable to my wife, and I need to take care of all of my stuff, or I need to take care of our stuff, because it affects the both of us. That was definitely an adjustment for me. It's the consequences for two of us now, you know what I mean? And then I think another thing along the intentionality lines was learning your love languages, acts of service and gifts. And I was like, I'm like a terrible gift giver. Like I was not like the most thoughtful, and my problem was I would get so stressed because I was like, I don't know if she's gonna love this gift or not. I don't know if it's gonna be good. But learning her love language just stressed me out at first. But then I like really just dove into it and was like, all right, then I'm gonna just put a lot of time and effort into like trying to get good gifts, or really just giving like thoughtful gifts was really how you felt love. And so oftentimes it was some like little random like thing that I did. And Danielle was like, oh, that like, I loved that so much. Like that was my favorite thing ever. And it really was not like a ton of effort or something like that, but it just took me thinking about it. You're like, oh, maybe she would think this is cool or fun. So definitely learning her love languages, and then just putting in time and effort and intentionality into getting better at those things has helped Danielle, I think, feel a lot more loved. And so that's been super, super helpful for me. Learning how you feel loved. You guys have talked about it before on the podcast, but learning how you feel loved and loving you the way that you feel most loved.
I will also say, he won't say about himself, but Connor has the biggest servant heart I've ever seen. And that is something I think that makes any good spouse. Like, Connor consistently shows me how to like serve people in a loving way, because he does it for me constantly, and he does it for everyone around him, but definitely for me. And it's like, I heard someone say in marriage, it's like you should be trying to like outserve your spouse. And I think sometimes it's like when we notice things that you've said, like when we're not reading our Bible, or like life is crazy, you like notice yourself like not serving your spouse, like you're just like focusing more and more on yourself, and it's like me. And then it's like, oh my gosh, you can just see that in the relationship. And then when you are just focused on like serving each other and like helping each other and like Connor usually does the dishes, but then it's like, if I know he's gonna have like a long day at work and has to do homework when he gets home, like surprising him with like doing those things, and he's doing chores that can take things off his plate, or just like something that makes him like feel special. You notice that fruit in your marriage when you're like serving each other. It's not like so you can get something, or sometimes even it's like to feel loved in return. Sometimes people will serve their spouse just so it's like, I can kind of earn love, which is like not a good heart to like serve your spouse out of, because it can be unhealthy when it's like, oh, I'm not doing this out of like love, I'm doing it to try to earn something. But it really is just like, how can I serve them best? How can I be selfless in this relationship? And marriage is really a mirror to yourself. You realize how selfish you are when you get married. And even the most selfless person, I think, is like, you get married and you're like, wow, I think about myself a ton. Right. I look out for myself all the time. And you really, it's like so hard to switch that, where it's like putting someone else first. Yeah. And that's why I think you need the Lord. Like in your marriage, it's like, Lord, how do I put my spouse above me? I remember earlier in our marriage, I realized I pray for me so much more than I pray for you. Like, I pray for me constantly, and I pray for you, but it's like, you see who you're concerned with, even, I think, when you see who you're praying about. And it's mostly, for me, it was mostly me. Maybe that's only me, but it's kind of like, yeah, Connor serves, like, that is just one of like your biggest, most wonderful qualities. People will like say that about Connor, but I think that makes, and a good spouse, not just a good husband, a good spouse is like, he's taught me how to do that, and I'm definitely not even close to as good as Connor is, but I just think that makes a good wife or a good husband, like out serving each other.
Yeah, and that is very true. Even as a newer friend of Connor's, even seeing him, having him at our house, as much, he's serving us as much in our home as we're serving him. He's like grabbing our plates. And
this morning, I'm gonna make eggs. He's like, I can make them. Like, no, he will not.
Yeah.
Guys, what do you think that the best part about being married is?
I would say that the best part about being married is literally just getting to spend time with like your best friend every day, and like live with your best friend. We love to talk. Danielle and I both love to talk, and so we just are talking all the time.
Gab, all the time.
I feel bad for any of our friends that we hang out with. It's hard to get a word into them, but like these guys are just
they
like,
never
please.
talk.
They come into our home. We invite them into our home, and then they don't shut up the entire time. Anyway, but yeah, just like having a friend who is there, like it's unconditional love. It's like someone who's going to be there through my highs, through my lows. And yeah, that's definitely the best part. It's just like having somebody there that's reliable, that you know you can count on. And really, there's nothing that kind of compares to that. You know, I mean, a really, really good friend, but like it's even beyond that. You know, I mean, it's that's the best part for me, just hanging out with the best friend every day. So
that would be nice.
You are a brat.
100% agree. And I feel like with anytime something good or bad happens to you in life, you may have a parent, you may have a friend who you can call and relate to. But having someone who's married, there's such a deeper and more personal impact that the successes and failures of your life has on your spouse. And that is the closest thing to, I think, maybe a shared experience that you can have with someone is with your spouse. Not everything, will feel as impactful to your spouse as it does to you. That's sadly a part of the fall of man, is that we're very separate, and that we're unable to really be fully known by anyone but God. But there is a depth of being known in marriage that you might not experience, if you let it, that you might not experience in friendship. And I would say, like, having that it makes life so much more interesting and fun. Just altogether better.
Yeah. It is the best. I think like you guys will said, it's like an intimacy of like being known.
Yeah.
And Annalise said this in our marriage podcast, where we were talking about how we both were afraid of commitment and did not know if we want to get married. But there is just this like freedom. This freedom in being loved. It's like, it doesn't really matter because someone's giving me unconditional love when I mess up, and there's forgiveness, and there's support, and there's someone who makes me better. Because it's like you marry, there's so many good things about your spouse. And I think sometimes we like forget that. There's like an episode of Modern Family. But it made me so emotional one time. It was like in the episode, Phil, the dad, was talking about, he's like, you marry someone who's like so extraordinary. And they kind of become normal to you over time. But you like forget. But they're like this extraordinary person. And I think that's like something that stuck with me. And I was like, that's so true. Like, I think Connor's like the best person I've ever met. And then you like take them for granted. But it is the best, like being married to your best friend. And
you're extraordinary.
Now turn to your neighbor and tell them they're extraordinary.
Am I the best
Alec,
person you've ever met?
You're a 3 out of 9. That's the on the Enneagram.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah.
I was really hoping Annalise would have said that.
You're a 10 out of 10.
No.
Okay, Alec, what is one fun fact about Annalise that people probably would not know?
Well, Annalise didn't get her driver's license until year 2020, which would put her at 24 years of age?
23.
23. Okay.
23, yeah. It was a running joke in college for all of us that knew her.
I've given Annalise many rides in my car.
So have I.
Yeah, for sure. But
Lots of bonding time. That's how she forced her way into our friendship and into our lives.
I need it.
She used it as a tool to build friendships.
Yeah. She was like, please, I need groceries. And we were like, oh, classic Annalise. She's just obsessed with us.
I'm starting to think that Annalise only befriended me for my car.
Yeah.
But
anyway, I do have a license now, and I am a great driver.
I have a license. That was your only defense at the age of 27.
Connor, what's a fun fact that people probably don't know about me?
I'll go with, I won't roast you, really. You hate cheese.
That's true.
She hates cheese.
That's true.
And me being from the Midwest, just like, you want a snack, you just eat some meat and cheese.
You're basically from Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm basically from Wisconsin, right?
And I'm Italian, so it's weird on my end.
But then the thing is, she will eat pizza. It's the thing with cheese and red sauce.
Selective hate.
She can eat cheese with red sauce, but then like most other instances, she hates
when
cheese.
I was growing up, I legitimately would see like cheese platters, and I was like, "Oh, that's for decoration." Like nobody would eat that. That smells horrible. And then people genuinely like have this crazy cult like love for cheese.
I do get that. I don't really eat cheese.
Like
cheese plain. That's not really been my thing. Like, although for some reason I could eat string cheese.
Oh yeah,
I'll do string cheese.
It's great.
I'll pretty much eat cheese in any form. I don't except blue cheese. That's
or camembert, right? We discovered this cheese.
We tried camembert cheese.
Don't get it
last night.
French cheese.
It's not very good.
Well, this she's like
this has been
anyway.
Yes.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Your Two Best Friends podcast with 2 more best friends that we got to have on today. We're so excited that they could join us and that we could do an episode in person. This is super rare for Annalise and I, but really fun that we get to have them on. So thank you, Alec and Connor, for being here.
Our pleasure.
And thank you all for tuning in. And we will see you next week for another episode. Goodbye, everybody, and have a great week.